The Namib is a coastal desert in southern Africa. According to the broadest definition, the Namib stretches for more than 2,000 kilometers, 1,200 miles, along the Atlantic coasts of Angola, Namibia, and northwest South Africa, extending southward from the Karunjamba River in Angola, through Namibia, and to the Olifants River in Western Cape, South Africa. The Namib's northernmost portion, which extends 450 kilometers, 280 miles, from the Angola-Namibia border, is known as Mokamedes Desert, while its southern portion approaches the neighboring Kalahari Desert. From the Atlantic coast eastward, the Namib gradually ascends in elevation, reaching up to 200 kilometers, 120 miles, inland to the foot of the Great Escarpment. Annual precipitation ranges from 2 mm, 0.079 in the aridest regions to 200 mm, 7.9 at the escarpment, making the Namib the only true desert in southern Africa. Having endured arid or semi-arid conditions for roughly 55 to 80 million years, the Namib may be the oldest desert in the world and contains some of the world's driest regions, with only western South America's Atacama Desert to challenge it for age and aridity benchmarks. The desert geology consists of sand seas near the coast, while gravel plains and scattered mountain outcrops occur further inland. The sand dunes, some of which are 300 meters, 980 feet, high and span 32 kilometers, 20 miles, long, are the second largest in the world after the Badan-Jiran Desert dunes in China. Temperatures along the coast are stable and generally range between 9 to 20 degrees Celsius, 48 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, annually, while temperatures further inland are variable. Summer daytime temperatures can exceed 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit, while nights can be freezing. 7 fogs that originate offshore from the collision of the cold Bengala Current and warm air from the Hadley Cell create a fog belt that frequently envelopes parts of the desert. Coastal regions can experience more than 180 days of thick fog a year. While this has proved a major hazard to ships, more than 1,000 wrecks litter the skeleton coast. It is a vital source of moisture for desert life. The Namib is almost completely uninhabited by humans except for several small settlements and indigenous pastoral groups, including the Ovahimba and Obajimba Herero in the north, and the Topnar Nama in the central region. Owing to its antiquity, the Namib may be home to more endemic species than any other desert in the world. Most of the desert wildlife is arthropods and other small animals that live on little water, although larger animals inhabit the northern regions. Near the coast, the cold ocean water is rich in fishery resources and supports populations of brown fur seals and shorebirds, which serve as prey for the skeleton coast's lions. Further inland, the Namib Naukluft National Park supports population of mountain zebras, and other large mammals. Further north near the skeleton coast, lions, elephants, and rhinos can be found. Although the outer Namib is largely barren of vegetation, lichens and succulents are found in coastal areas, while grasses, shrubs, and ephemeral plants thrive near the escarpment. Several types of trees are also able to survive the extremely arid climate. The name Namib is of Khoekhoegowab, or Nama language, origin, and has been variously reported to mean vast place and an area where there is nothing. The Namib Desert is one of the 500 distinct physiographic provinces of the South African Platform Physiographic Division. It occupies an area of around 80,950 square kilometers, 31,250 square miles, stretching from the Uniab River, north, to the town of Ludritz, south, and from the Atlantic Ocean, west, to the Namib Escarpment, east. It is about 1,600 kilometers, 1,000 miles long from north to south, and its east-west width varies from 50 to 160 kilometers, 30 to 100 miles. To the north, the desert leads into the Kaapveld. The dividing line between these two regions is roughly at the latitude of the city of Walvis Bay, and it consists in a narrow strip of land, about 50 kilometers wide, that is the driest place in southern Africa. To the south, the Namib borders the South African Karoo semi-desert. Southern Namib, between Lüderitz and the Kozabe River, comprises a vast dune sea with some of the tallest and most spectacular dunes in the world, ranging in color from pink to vivid orange. In the Sossusvlei area, several dunes exceed 300 meters, 1,000 feet, in height. The complexity and regularity of dune patterns in its dune sea have attracted the attention of geologists for decades, but it remains poorly understood. The source of the unconsolidated sand, the most recent sand sea, is dominantly from the Orange River, which drains into the Atlantic south of the Namib Sand Sea, with minor contributions in the east from the, now ephemeral, rivers that drain into the Sand Sea. For this reason, the Namib Sand Sea has been referred to as the wind-displaced delta of the Orange River. Moving north from Sossusvlei, the sand gradually gives way to a rocky desert that extends from Sossusvlei to the Swako River. This area is traversed by the Tropic of Capricorn and is mostly flat, although some scenic canyons and elevations are found in some areas, for example in the Moon Valley system. While most of the soil is rocky, sand dunes are still occasionally found in this region. For example, sand dunes occupy much of the coastline between Walvis Bay and Swakopmund. The Namib Desert is an important location for the mining of tungsten, salt, and diamonds. Several rivers and streams run through the Namib, although all of the rivers south of the Cunene River and north of the Orange River are ephemeral and rarely or never reach the ocean. These rivers arise in the interior mountains of Namibia and flow after summer rainstorms. The Namib's aridity is caused by the descent of dry air of the Hadley Cell, cooled by the cold Bengala Current along the coast. It has less than 10 millimeters, 0.39 in, of rain annually and is almost completely barren. Besides rain being scarce, it is also unpredictable. Western Namib gets less rain, 5 millimeters, than Eastern Namib, 85 millimeters. This is due to several factors. Winds coming from the Indian Ocean lose part of their humidity when passing the Drakensberg Mountains, and are essentially dry when they reach the Namib Escarpment at the eastern end of the desert. On the other hand, winds coming from the Atlantic Ocean are pressed down by hot air from the east, their humidity thus forms clouds and fog. Morning fogs coming from the ocean and pushing inwards into the desert are a regular phenomenon along the coast, and much of the life cycle of animals and plants in the Namib relies on these fogs as the main source of water. The dry climate of Namib reflects the almost complete lack of bodies of water on the surface. Most rivers flow underground and/or are dry for most of the year. Even when they are not, they usually drain into endorheic basins, without reaching the sea. The Swako and the Omaruru are the only rivers that occasionally drain into the ocean. All along the coast, but mostly in the northernmost part of it, the interaction between the water-laden air coming from the sea via southerly winds, some of the strongest of any coastal desert, and the dry air of the desert causes immense fogs and strong currents. It causes sailors to lose their way. This is testified by the remnants of several shipwrecks that can be found along the Skeleton Coast, in northern Namib. Some of these wrecked ships can be found as much as 50 meters, 55 yards, inland, as the desert slowly moves westwards into the sea, reclaiming land over many years. Bengala's El Niño, similar to the Pacific event in its environmental change in the seas, spreads from the Cunene estuary southward to, on occasion, south of Lüderitz. Warm waters with depth and associated water flow from the northwest were first fully catalogued by sea fisheries researchers, in Cape Town, L.V. Shannon et al. The research noted the positive effect of Bengala's El Niño on the rainfall of the interior. Rainfall records also show positive values variously across the Namib, Desert Research Station, and Gobabeb for instance. This event recurs approximately mid-decade. Recent examples are 1974, 1986, 1994, 1995, and 2006. Several unusual species of plants and animals are found in this desert, many of which are endemic and highly adapted to the specific climate of the area. One of the most well-known endemic plants of the Namib is the bizarre Welwitschia mirabilis, a shrub-like plant. It grows two long strap-shaped leaves continuously throughout its lifetime. These leaves may be several meters long, gnarled, and twisted from the desert winds. The taproot of the plant develops into a flat, concave disc in age. Welwitschia is notable for its survival in the extremely arid Namib conditions, made possible by its ability to capture moisture from coastal sea fogs. Areas where welwitschias are a common sight include the eponymous Welwitschia Plains, which are adjacent to the Husab uranium mine, one of the largest of its kind in the world. Fairy circles, which are circular patches of land barren of plants, varying between 22 and 12 meters, 7 and 39 feet, in diameter and often encircled by a ring of stimulated growth of grass, are found in the Namib, such as those near the Wolwedens desert camp. The Namib fauna mostly comprises arthropods and other small animals that can live on little water, but a few species of bigger animals are also found, including antelopes, such as gemsboks and springboks, ostriches, and in some areas even desert elephants or lions. All these species have developed techniques to survive in the Namib environment. Several endemic darkling beetle species have different methods of collecting water droplets from morning fog. They are collectively known as fog beetles. For example, one beetle, Anemacris unguicularis, has smooth elytrons that cause humidity from the morning fogs to condense into droplets, which roll down the beetle's back to its mouth. Another beetle, the Lepidoptera discoidalis, builds water-capturing webs. Blackback jackals lick humidity from stones. Gemsboks, also known as the South African oryx, can raise the temperature of their bodies to 40 degrees Celsius in the hottest hours of the day. The desert is also home to meerkats and several species of lizards. Before the 20th century, some San roamed the Namib, gathering edible plants on the shore, hunting in the interior, and drinking the juice of the tsama melon for water. Today, some Hereros still herd their livestock in the Kayakavelt in the Namib and take them from waterhole to waterhole. A few Namakoikhoi still graze their livestock on the banks of the Kozabe River in the desert. Most of the native people have left, leaving the vast majority of the desert uninhabited. The steppes in the southern half of the desert are mostly made up of ranches run by Europeans, who raise caracal sheep with local help and send the pelts of the lambs to Europe for use in fur coats. Most of the rest of the desert is set aside for conservation. A vast portion of the desert, called the Spergabayat, was access restricted due to the presence of diamonds, which are mined in the area at the mouth of the Orange River. Although the desert is largely unpopulated and inaccessible, there are year-round settlements at Sesriem, close to the Sossusvlei area, and other small outposts in other locations. Mokamades in Angola and Ludritz, Walvis Bay and Swakopmund in Namibia, bordering on the desert, are the main settlements in the area. The 2015 film Mad Max, Fury Road was filmed here. In 2019 the Namibian-German artist Max Siedentop created an installation in the Namib consisting of a ring of large white blocks atop of which sit 6 speakers attached to a solar-powered MP3 player configured to continuously play the 1982 song Africa by the American band Toto. The exact location of the installation has not been disclosed. The Namib Naukluft National Park, which extends over a large part of the Namib Desert, is the largest game reserve in Africa and one of the largest in the world. While most of the park is hardly accessible, several well-known visitor attractions are found in the desert. The prominent attraction is the Sossusvlei area, where high orange sand dunes surround vivid white salt pans, creating a fascinating landscape. Access to the park is either by gravel roads or dust roads, except for 60 km of concrete road from the Sesriem Gate to Sossusvlei, or by light aircraft from Windhoek, the capital of Namibia, about 480 kilometers or 300 miles northeast of the center of the desert, or Swakopmund and Walvis Bay at the north end of the desert. Namib, a cool coastal desert extending for 1,200 miles, 1,900 kilometers, along the Atlantic coast of Africa from Namibi, formerly Mokamades, in Angola southward across Namibia to the Olifants River in the Western Cape Province of South Africa. It reaches inland 80 to 100 miles, 130 to 160 kilometers, to the foot of the Great Escarpment. The southern portion merges with the Kalahari on the plateau atop the escarpment. Its name is derived from the Nama language, implying an area where there is nothing. The Namib is arid and is almost totally uninhabited, except for a small number of scattered towns. It is important because of the trade routes that cross it, its mineral deposits, the fisheries of the bordering sea, and its increasing utilization for recreational purposes. The Namib Desert spans part of the west coast of southern Africa. It touches part of the countries of Angola, Namibia, and South Africa. The Namib is divided into three successive north-south trending strips: the very narrow coastal region along the Atlantic, strongly subject to marine influences, the outer Namib, occupying the rest of the western half of the desert, and the inner Namib, constituting the eastern portion. The boundaries between them consist of broad transition zones. The desert basically consists of a relatively smooth platform of truncated bedrock of various types and ages. Micaschist and other metamorphics and granite and similar intrusives predominate. The platform rises gradually from the coast to about 3,000 feet, 900 meters, at the foot of the Great Escarpment. Scattered isolated mountains rise steeply and abruptly above the platform, and in the northern half several streams have carved deep steep-walled gorges into it. In much of the southern half of the desert the platform is surmounted by a vast expanse of sand yellow-gray near the coast and brick-red inland, which is derived from the Orange River and from other rivers that flow westward from the escarpment but never reach the sea. The dunes run in lines from north-northwest to south-southeast, individual dunes having lengths of 10 to 20 miles, 16 to 32 kilometers, and reaching heights of 200 to 800 feet, 60 to 240 meters. The troughs between these lines of dunes are interrupted by smaller transverse dunes. The extreme southern coastal area consists of wind-scoured bedrock and a few rapidly moving crescent-shaped barkhans, i.e., dunes convex to the wind. The northern third, the Kayakavelt region, consists of gravel plains and rock platforms occurring between scattered rugged mountains, interspersed with a few large dune fields. Being an almost rainless area, the Namib has a poorly developed and fragmentary drainage pattern. Water from the interior plateau flows through or into the desert. In the northern half the larger streams reach the sea, but between the Kozabe and the Orange rivers every stream terminates in a vili, salt pan or mudflat, against or among the dunes. A portion of the water of major streams seeps through the sands of the stream beds. The underflow of the Kozabe River has been tapped 25 miles, 40 kilometers, inland to provide water supplies for the towns of Walvis Bay and Swakopmund. A pipeline 80 miles, 130 kilometers, long supplies the town of Ludritz with water from the seepage of the Koichab, a stream that terminates in the dunes. Only the Kunene, and Orange rivers flow permanently on the surface. Other streams have surface flow only after heavy rainfall in the interior plateaus. They normally flow for no more than a few days in several years. Large areas of the Namib are completely soilless, with bedrock at the surface. Other areas are covered with shifting sand. Soils that do occur are often highly saline, impregnated with gypsum, or cemented firmly by calcium carbonate, the latter forming a calc-reedy layer just below the surface. Arable soils in the Namib are limited to floodplains and the terraces of major rivers and are subject to occasional inundation. The coastal area is almost totally rainless, yet its air is almost always at or near the saturation point. The cold Bengala current flows northward along the coast, chilling the air above it and thus producing fog. This cool air moves inland as a southwest sea breeze, creating a temperature inversion about 1,000 feet, 300 meters, thick, with fog below and hot, dry air above. At the coast there is little difference in temperature between day and night or between winter and summer. Temperatures are usually between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 and 16 degrees Celsius. Along the inland margins, summer temperatures normally reach the upper 80s F, low 30s C. Only in areas sheltered from the cooling sea breeze, lee sides of mountains and bottoms of canyons, do temperatures frequently approach those expected in low-latitude deserts, i.e., in excess of 100 degrees Fahrenheit 38 degrees Celsius. Freezing temperatures occur occasionally along the inner edge of the desert. A few days each year, usually in fall or spring, berg, mountain, winds blowing from the east bring high temperatures, above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, together with dry air and clouds of dust, across the desert to the coast itself. The rare rains occur usually as short-lived torrential thunderstorms. Average annual precipitation is generally about 0.5 inch, 13 millimeters, at the coast, increasing inland until it reaches 2 inches, 51 millimeters, at the foot of the escarpment. In some years, however, no rain falls at all. Dew, on the other hand, is heavy and for some types of vegetation is more important than the rainfall. In the extreme south, some winter precipitation occurs from frontal storms passing farther south over the Cape region. On rare occasions, snow may fall on the higher southern mountains. 6 vegetational regions are found in the Namib. 1. The coastal region, with highly succulent vegetation, which uses moisture derived from the fog. 2. The almost completely barren outer Namib. 3. The steppes of the inner Namib, which in many years are barren but which in wet years are covered with short grasses, both annual and perennial. 4. The dunes of the inner Namib, which produce a surprisingly rich flora of bushes and tall grasses. 5. The larger river channels, along which large trees, particularly acacias, grow, and 6. The southern winter rainfall area, where a succulent bush growth occurs. A curious Namib plant is the tumbo, or Welwitschia mirabilis, whose 2 gigantic leaves sprawl over the surface of the ground from the crest of its huge root crown. The plains and the dunes of the inner Namib support large numbers of several varieties of antelope, especially gemsbok, oryx, and springbok, as well as ostriches and some zebras. Elephants, rhinoceroses, lions, hyenas, and jackals are found in the northern Namib, especially along the rivers that flow from the interior highlands to the Atlantic. The dunes of the outer Namib provide habitats for various types of insects and reptiles, especially beetles, geckos, and snakes, but virtually no mammals. The shore area is densely populated by marine birds, notably flamingos, pelicans, and, in the southern part, penguins, as well as a few jackals, some rodents, and a few colonies of seals. Large quantities of guano are scraped annually from the rocks of several offshore islands. A few San roamed the Namib until early in the 20th century, gathering whatever was edible along the shore, hunting in the inner Namib, and often depending on the bitter juices of the tsama, melon for water. A small number of Herero continue to herd cattle and goats from waterhole to waterhole in the desert part of the Kayakavelt, living in their traditional manner. A few Topnar Namakoakho graze their sheep and goats on the riverine vegetation along the Kozabe River. A great part of the Namib is now totally unused and unoccupied, the Aboriginal people having left to adopt new homes and new ways of life. A few areas, however, are productive in some way. The innermost steppes in the southern half of the desert are divided into private farms, ranches, which are operated by Europeans using local labor and are devoted to the raising of caracal sheep. The wavy-haired pelts of newborn lambs of these sheep are used for fur coats in Europe. Much of the central and northern Namib has been set aside for recreation and conservation. The Namib Desert Park in the central area is a desert range for antelopes, zebras, and ostriches. A strip about 130 miles, 210 kilometers, in length along the coast northwest of Swakopmund constitutes the National West Coast Tourist Area. Within it is the Cape Cross Seal Reserve, which protects a breeding area. Farther north is the Skeleton Coast National Park, where entry is restricted in order to preserve the fragile desert environment. A vast area stretching from the Kozabe River to the Orange River on the South African border and reaching inland some 80 miles, 130 kilometers, constitutes the Spergabayat, prohibited area, to which all entry was long restricted because of the possible presence of diamonds there. Diamonds are extracted from alluvial beds near the coast by large-scale equipment, chiefly in the area near the mouth of the Orange River. There are 4 cities on the Namib coast. Swakopmund, the summer capital for Namibia and a popular coastal resort town, still retains much of the atmosphere from the days when Southwest Africa was a German colony. Swakopmund has been greatly changed by the development of a large uranium mine located some 25 miles, 40 kilometers, inland. Walvis Bay, just to the south of Swakopmund, is a coastal enclave formerly belonging to South Africa that was transferred to Namibia in 1994. It is a modern port city with a mixed population, the Africans consisting partly of Nama families from south-central Namibia but largely of male Umbo from Angola and the northern part of Namibia who have found employment at the port. The port serves as a base for fishing fleets that supply both shore canneries and cannery ships on the open sea. It is the major transshipment port for Namibia. Lüderitz, a small town on a shallow, rock-strewn harbor, has a small trade with Walvis Bay and Cape Town and is the center of a lobster industry. Oranjemund, a company town of the Namdeb Diamond Corp, is a base for large-scale diamond mining in the alluvial gravels along the southern coast. The Namib is crossed by rail lines and tarred roads, both from Walvis Bay, Swakopmund and from Lüderitz, which are integrated with the internal rail and road systems of Namibia and South Africa. Except for roads from Swakopmund north for about 130 miles, 210 kilometers, between Swakopmund and Walvis Bay, and from Lüderitz to Oranjemund, no improved roads exist along the coast, in the Kayakavelt to the northwest, or in the area between Walvis Bay and Lüderitz. Cursory exploratory voyages were made along the coast from the 15th to the 17th century. Walvis, Whalefish Bay was used as a base for New England whaling ships in the early 19th century, and there were direct routes for traders and missionaries from Lüderitz and Walvis Bay into the interior. Otherwise, little was known of the Namib until the latter part of the 19th century. After Southwest Africa was established as a colony of Germany in the early 1890s, the German military began detailed exploration and mapping of the desert. Thank you for watching this video.